John from DominoWorldRecord.com here with another episode of This Day in Domino History. Imagine if you set a Guinness World Record and nobody knew about it. Well, that kind of happened to 6 University of Washington students after they toppled 13,832 dominoes on June 6, 1975 in Seattle, beating the very first record of 11,111 done by Bob Speca 6 months earlier. Their achievement did appear in the 1976 Guinness Book of World Records, but the very brief entry didn't even list their names. Now today, 50 years later, nothing is known about this world record. So as we look at this story now, I guess this should really be an episode of Unsolved Mysteries. I've always been curious about this particular record, but all the internet searches I've tried in the past have never turned up anything new. Then in January of this year, an online ad for newspapers.com caught my eye. Their website has the largest searchable database of newspaper scans going back hundreds of years. Figured it was worth a shot, so I signed up for a free trial. I keyed in University of Washington Domino World Record and searched across Washington state newspapers published in 1975. I was surprised when a few items came back, one of which actually listed the students' names. However, the 3 articles were very short and had little information beyond those names and the location of the topple. Then an idea popped into my head. I emailed that 1975 article listing the 6 names to the University of Washington Alumni Association and explained my quest to try to make contact with these former world record holders. 3 weeks later, I got a reply from the Alumni Association saying that they had forwarded my email on to a few of those students. Then on March 3rd, I got an email from Roger Pomeroy, who confirmed that he was the organizer of the team that set that world record. Roger and I eventually talked on the phone, and he told me the whole story about their world record. And it was nothing like I had imagined. Roger Pomeroy and his 5 friends set that 1975 record on June 6th, only 17 days after Bob Speca made his first appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson on May 20th. The common assumption is that they saw Speca topple his chain of 7,000 dominoes on The Tonight Show and immediately were inspired to break Bob's record. Roger told me he saw that episode of The Tonight Show, and it sort of was the catalyst for them doing their record, but not in the way you would think. Roger went on to tell me that their domino story actually began a year earlier. At the start of 1974, Roger and his friends John Vimont, Patrick Jankanish, and Brian Takami were winding down their senior year at Fife High School in Washington. Inspired by their physics class teacher, the 4 friends began having discussions about dominoes in May of that year. They imagined what it would take to topple an incredibly long row of dominoes, which led to questions about, well, where could we get those dominoes and where could we set them up? It's interesting to note that Roger, John, Patrick, and Brian were trying to figure out how they could do something big with dominoes on the West Coast, while at the same time on the East Coast, Pennsylvania high school student Bob Speca was wowing his friends with large domino displays in his basement, 7 months before he would set the very first world record. Who knew that the origins of modern domino toppling were percolating in parallel universes? Now for Roger and his friends, this domino idea kind of became an obsession, but purchasing many thousands of dominoes was out of the question. So Roger tried a different approach. He wrote letters to the Milton Bradley Company, asking if they would donate 20,000 dominoes to help bring their physics experiment to life. He even offered to give away the dominoes to charity afterwards, hoping that that might sway the company's decision. Roger mailed letters to 4 people at Milton Bradley, including the CEO and the head of marketing. It wasn't until Roger and his friends all started their freshman year at the University of Washington that a couple of replies finally came back. Unfortunately, both letters rejected their request. It seemed like their domino dream was dead. So 7 months after those rejection letters, How did Speca's Tonight Show appearance end up being the catalyst for Roger and his friends attempting that world record? Well, what happened after Roger watched that episode of Carson is the perfect example of the Tonight Show's influence during that era. Throughout the 1970s, Johnny Carson was the undisputed king of late night TV and gatekeeper of the cultural zeitgeist for the country. If you made it on Carson, you were cool, and everyone talked about you. The show's average nightly audience was 9 million viewers, so Bob Speca and his Dominoes instantly were known throughout the United States the day after his May 20th appearance. That fact was going to impact Roger's life very quickly. On May 21st, Roger got a call from a lady at the firm handling publicity for Milton Bradley. Apparently, word of Roger's letters had made its way to them. She asked, "Did you see that Domino guy on The Tonight Show last night?" To which Roger said, "Yeah, of course I saw that." She told him that Milton Bradley would be sending him 20,000 Dominoes within the next week to fulfill his request. Because this publicity firm moved so quickly, it meant that they understood if Dominoes were toppled on the Carson show, the country would be buzzing about it. And the time to capitalize on that was right now. Roger couldn't believe what he heard. The dream that was dead suddenly came back to life. And now he was faced with trying to put together a world record attempt before the school year came to an end. Roger immediately told John, Patrick, and Brian the great news, and the four of them recruited college friends Paul Birkeland and Chris Weatherill to join their team. The next week, boxes and boxes of Dominoes arrived, but there was a bit of a surprise. Instead of sending first quality Dominoes boxed for retail sale, Milton Bradley sent unpackaged factory reject Dominoes that had smeared paint on the dots or broken edges. The guys had to sort through all those loose Dominoes to find the ones with good edges that could be used for toppling. In the end, they discarded about 25% of the Dominoes, leaving them with 15,000, which was enough to go for the record. With the manpower and materials in place, the last piece was finding the right place to set up the Dominoes, and their search ultimately ended at an off-campus location. They chose the Seattle Center House, home of the Food Circus food court. Now, this food court was on an upper-level wraparound balcony, and it had a smooth, solid floor, which was good for domino toppling. The team arranged to start their work late on the night of June 5th after the building closed. And they pulled an all-nighter, working 10 hours to set up the 15,000 Dominoes. Because of the limited time, they had to keep the setup simple to get it done quickly. From the starting point of the first Domino, their setup had a single line that looped all the way around the food court balcony a couple of times. And then the setup finished with a large outline of the United States. Roger told me that the team experimented with the idea of maybe doing an outline of the iconic Seattle Space Needle, but they scrapped that idea and went with the US outline instead. On the morning of June 6th, with friends and lots of curious spectators watching, the topple was ready to begin. Now, this is the only known picture from that day, taken after the Dominoes started falling. Despite the poor scan quality, you can make out a few things. Here you can see where the chain had been started, with the line going to the left. Next to that, you can see another fallen row that comes all the way from the right of the picture and goes off camera to the left. That's where the first loop around the balcony completed and started its second time around, which is what the spectators are watching in this picture. Then there's a third line still standing, which won't fall until the second loop comes back from its trek around the balcony. After the loops around the balcony finished, the outline of the US started falling. And then when that got around to Washington State and the place where the capital, Olympia, was represented in Dominoes, the chain, unfortunately, and somewhat ironically, stopped almost 1,200 Dominoes before the end. It wasn't a perfect topple, but with 13,832 Dominoes, they had their world record. Later that fall, the 1976 edition of the Guinness Book of World Records came out. And it contained the first entry in the new domino toppling category. Roger told me that they were happy to see the record listed, but it was a huge letdown when they saw their names weren't part of that entry. Of course it was a huge letdown. That's a big part of why people go for world records. They want to see their names immortalized in the record setter's Bible. We can't undo what's been done, but now that this mystery has been solved, and the world finally knows about this University of Washington world record team, it's time to give them the recognition that is so long overdue. So with thanks to Roger Pomeroy for providing this great picture, here is that 1975 team. From left to right, Roger Pomeroy, John Vimont, Patrick Jankanish, Chris Weatherill, Brian Takami, and Paul Birkeland. You guys were domino toppling trailblazers. And on behalf of today's global domino community, congratulations on achieving your world record. We'll catch you again on the next This Day in Domino History. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, and check out dominoworldrecord.com for the latest news on our plans to attempt another world record in the coming years. If you're an experienced builder and want to work with some of the best domino artists on the planet, we'd love for you to join the Domino Dream Team. Our team needs 100 more topplers to show sponsors our community is ready to go after a world record of at least 5 million dominoes. So sign up today.